Welcome, one and all, to the mystical world of Filbar. Adventures abound throughout this realm, and we appreciate the opportunity to regale you with some stories from these trails. These accounts are all based on actual RPG experiences that occurred within Adventures in Filbar. Some of these tales may be for mature audiences, while others may be for very immature audiences. We now present the sage Mikas Tumo from Tamel, also known as the Bard of Filbar.
Welcome to session Fartook-95. In our last episode, the party split up with Sister Elaine and Investigator Rockfist, a dwarf, working to solve the murder, and the rest of the party going to get some food. While at the Shield and Crossbow Tavern, the main group spotted Meebles, the innkeeper, enter and look around for someone. Back in the inn, the two ladies discovered that Hagrid's room had been ransacked and found remains of the broken prisoner's jewel. We rejoin the bulk of the adventurers in the tavern. Okay, I think he spotted whoever he wants to talk to in the far corner, pointed out Lady Irena. Bolger and Fargus asked if they could hear the discussion, but both she and Cabe reported too much background noise. Karina asked if she could make out who the Weasley innkeeper was speaking with. Each craned their neck, but stated that the individual was in the shadows and could not be identified. The party squirmed in their seats in anticipation of learning more about the meeting when the barmaid returned to the table. "Is there anything else I can get you folks this evening?" she inquired. Fargus and Bolger both ordered more drinks, and Karina asked if she could borrow the woman's cleaning cloth. Puzzled, the waitress turned over the wet cloth and went off to fetch more drinks. The group looked at the waif and watched as she pulled a swatch of cloth from a pocket and pulled her hair back. She unbuttoned her shirt to give a rather copious view of her chest. Moving quickly through the crowded tavern, she spun past several tables to the far corner, grabbing several empty tankards along the way. The group was quickly alarmed as she watched her address the people at the table where the innkeeper was. From their vantage point, it was clear that the innkeeper hadn't looked at the waif above the shoulders. His hand ran along her skirt up to Karina's rump, but was quickly smacked away. At this point, the innkeeper scowled and for the first time looked at the young woman's face. Jumping out of the chair, he pointed and yelled, "It's one of them!" The party jumped from their chairs and tried to move through the crowd as it was clear Karina had been identified. Over the heads of the patrons, the party watched the hooded figure rise and extend an arm. Light flashed and encased the young woman in sparkling lights, causing her to rise off the ground. With so much foot traffic in the business, the delvers struggled to get to the other side. Gabe picked up a mug as one patron was beginning to sip from it and threw it across the way towards the hooded subject. The throw was off, but soundly struck Meebles the innkeeper in the head, sending frothy alcohol all over the hooded person. Extending their arm again, the party noticed that Karina, in a glistening trance, was headed right for them. The figure yanked the arm down, flipped the cloak, and moved swiftly out of the establishment as the waif collided with Lady Irena and Bolger, knocking them over into a crowd of men drinking. With beverages spilled, tempers flared quickly. The bar fight started quickly as the men with the spilled tankers punched Bolger and threw the Leith mage into another table, causing that group consternation. The gnome reciprocated to his attacker and caught the man squarely in the jaw, knocking him backwards. Fargus and Cabe halted but were quickly ordered to get the cloaked figure. Despite their best judgment, the pair took off, fighting their way through the throng of patrons before reaching the doorway. The bar fight escalated quickly as numerous innocent patrons were getting knocked into and splashed on by spilled beverages. Two musicians in the corner began to play a catchy little tune and the business erupted into a melee. Two men grabbed the dizzy Karina and flung her into the group just as she was getting over the spell. She crashed into the men who attempted to punch her. She dropped down, and each man landed a crushing blow to the other instead of her, knocking each other out. A female barbarian was in the middle of the fight and was swinging with reckless abandon. She targeted Lady Irena, who spied a serving platter. The barbarian swung a meaty fist at the elven mage, who lifted the platter up just in time. The woman's clenched fist dented the platter and caused it to wrap around her fist. The mage kicked the now metal-covered fist into the barbarian's jaw, knocking her out as well. Blood dripping down from an eyebrow wound, Irena decided enough was enough and began to murmur a spell. A moment later, The tavern common room exploded into a plethora of sinewy strands as her web spell was set at ground zero. Nearly everyone was caught in the webs, and those who weren't were backing up against the walls to avoid being caught in the sticky situation. Lady Irena withdrew her blade and cut strands until her associates were freed. The trio then headed out the door before the spell dispersed. Looking outside, they could not tell which way Cabe and Fargus had gone and had to make a decision. The door opened and Rockfist called out, "Mama, I'm home. Where are you?" Sister Elaine was puzzled that the investigator lived with her mom and was equally surprised when another dwarf jumped out and tackled the investigator to the ground. The pair rolled around on the floor and Sister Elaine picked up a chair to strike the assailant until she heard the pair laughing. Pausing her swing, the two dwarves separated laughing. Looking up at the cleric, both dwarves held up their hand. The investigator told the cleric it was okay and introduced her mother. Sister Elaine put the chair down and helped both stout women back up. She introduced herself, and the dwarven matron apologized for the shock. "You see, we like to surprise each other. Helps you to keep your wits in a tough scrape." The cleric grinned at the situation and was told to have a seat. The two dwarves quibbled, and the investigator confirmed that neither had eaten. A stern look from the mother reminded the girl who was really in charge. "I have some soup. There's probably enough for both of you," said the mother to both younger females. Rockfist pointed out that Elaine might like the soup, but warned it could be spicy. A few minutes passed, and the matron brought out 2 large bowls of steaming fluid. Rockfist quickly began to suck up the soup, and the hesitant Elaine tried just a bit at first. The spices flooded her senses, and a large smile crossed her face. "This is delicious," remarked the Reverend daughter, and began to gobble it up quickly. The mother looked to her daughter and congratulated her on finally finding a friend with a sense of culinary delight.
We close out this episode now and give you our thanks for listening. Please subscribe to this podcast and don't forget to follow us on Twitter at The Bards Podcast. For everyone in Adventures of Filbar, thanks for listening.